look at Tim Witherspoon, and here is Tim Witherspoon right now as he makes his way out of his locker room and down toward the ring here at the Las Vegas Convention Center. Witherspoon looks very much warmed up, and again, that's something you've talked about on so many occasions, Ray, as being of infinite importance.
I think for the first round, Barry, loosen up in the dressing room is very, very important.
He's a very confident guy, Tim Witherspoon, and really he's a guy who seems to be almost wise beyond his boxing years.
Well, first of all, because of the experience, and he's been through this, the excitement, the attention, the spotlight. We have to see what's going to happen with Greg Page.
We have to consider the fact that when he fought Larry Holmes for the title, Tim Witherspoon had had as many fights as Larry Holmes had had title fights, and yet he almost won it. And in the minds of many people here in Las Vegas, he did win that fight.
It was a very good fight on the part of Tim Witherspoon. He was very courageous, and he fought a gallant fight.
Here's another guy who didn't have a long amateur career. He only had 6 amateur fights. As a matter of fact, he lost his last amateur fight to Marvis Frazier. But he's had 22 professional fights, or rather 18 professional fights. He's won 17 of them, and that's considering the fact he did not turn pro until the age of 22 years.
I think this is a perfect matchup, boxer against puncher. Greg Page, the boxer, well, we'll see the very first round against Tim Witherspoon, the lethal puncher.
We're also going to be seeing here a match between two great heavyweight traditions. Terrible Tim Witherspoon, the Philadelphia tradition. Sonny Liston trained in Philadelphia. Joe Frazier came out of Philadelphia. Ali trained in Philadelphia. Of course, Larry Holmes comes from nearby Easton, Pennsylvania. And Greg Page comes out of the Louisville tradition. Ali and Jimmy Ellis. And oddly enough, I can't find anybody that knows anyone who's another outstanding fighter who came out of Louisville. There's Witherspoon's record.
Do you put Witherspoon in the mold of the true Philadelphia boxer?
Well, all you can say is that there's such a strong subculture of boxing in Philadelphia that in the gymnasiums he's probably had a lot of experiences that a fighter with a lot more fights would not have had. And that does count for something, perhaps counts for his poise, despite the few fights he's had.
Yeah, that's the thing that really does strike me, Ray, is he is remarkably poised. You know, he hasn't been awed by the fact that here he is in a championship fight. He wasn't awed by the fact that he was fighting Larry Holmes. Just kind of seems to have everything in the proper perspective.
Witherspoon likes the initial challenge, and he's never in awe of anything, and he's been through it, and that's why he looks so comfortable now.
He's been around some pretty big guys. As a matter of fact, he did spar with Greg Page, and here's a look at Greg Page as he starts toward the ring now. Witherspoon sparred with Page, Burbick, Michael Spinks, Eddie Mustafa Muhammad, James Scott. He's been around some guys who really know their way around a ring. Meanwhile, it is Greg Page who starts to make his way in now. Greg Page had an interesting observation about himself. He said, they say I'm too heavy, they say I can't punch, they say I'm not serious, they say I'm fat, I'm too old, I'm too young, I'm a myth, I'm a fluke, I'm a poor exhibition of a fighter, and he said, I love it.
Well, Greg Page, he's a natural-born athlete, a great hand speed, really good power, and the fact that they criticize his discipline. But I think this is his first title fight, and he's really pumped up for it. The first round, again, Barry, is going to be very interesting.
Well, Eddie Futch, one of the senior trainers in this business, said about Greg Page that he has everything it takes if he would just settle down and get his head on straight, if he would ever listen. And I think what we're going to find out tonight, really, is if he is listening to anybody except Greg Page. Larry, I think it's perhaps a fact a fighter can't train himself.
Well, a veteran fighter can, but I think the most serious rap against Page has been is that he has never put himself in the hands of top professionals as Ali did. And he's a self-taught fighter, and he's much the same fighter as when he came out of the amateur ranks, where he had won national titles twice.
So there's a look at Tim Witherspoon as he awaits the arrival of Greg Page. Actually, this is one of the less raucous ring entrances that I've seen. Both men pretty much within themselves, and the crowd really not taking sides yet.
Well, I think once the first bell rings and they go out, and whoever's leading the most points in early rounds, that's when the crowd will take sides.
It is quite a distance from the locker room to the ring, and Tim Witherspoon has had quite a lot of time to sit and wait for Greg Page, and you can see Page is still not to the ring. He's still got about another 25 or 30 yards to go to get there.
And that's the longest walk.
You don't think that extra weight is already slowing him down, do you, Ray?
I doubt that very seriously, Larry. But the walk from the dressing room to the ring, especially your first big title fight, oh, it's so pressure.
Well, the question about Greg Page historically has been stamina. And now here's a guy coming in at 239.5 pounds, and you have to question it perhaps tonight even more than you usually do.
But by the same token, as Ray pointed out earlier, his worst fight was against Trevor Berbick when he listened to everybody and came in at 218 pounds. So maybe he needs that extra weight as a sort of blanket of security.
So let's take a look at the numbers on this fight and how do they look. So the numbers, Greg Page and Tim Witherspoon, very comparable in age, very comparable in height, not very comparable in weight. 19 pounds, 19 and change actually, to the advantage or the disadvantage of Greg Page, whichever way it happens to be. The people that they have fought who are common opponents, the last two probably the most significant, Ronaldo Snipes and Quick Tillis, and it was quick for Tim Witherspoon. We saw that fight. It was over before it started. It took Greg Page 8 rounds, and in fact, Tillis did hurt Page in the second round of that fight. Let's take a look at the record of Greg Page, and it is impressive to be sure. 23 victories, 1 loss. He's had 18 knockouts along the way. He has never quite lived up to his press clippings, and tonight, of course, he can really make amends for all of that. His desire has been questioned on numerous occasions. And so right now, let's go up to the ring announcer, Chuck Hull, for the pre-fight introductions.
Ladies and gentlemen, the officials assigned by the Nevada State Athletic Commission for the next bout of the evening. The judges are Lou Tabbitt, Chuck Minker, and Jerry Roth. The attending physicians at ringside, Doctors Donald Romeo and James Game. The timekeeper is Charlie Roth. Counting at the knockdowns, Mike Lachella. And the referee is Mills Lane. This is the main event of the evening and sanctioned by the Nevada State Athletic Commission, Art Lurie, chairman, and by the World Boxing Council, Jose Suleiman, president. A 12-round event for the vacant heavyweight championship of the world with the World Boxing Council. Introducing in the blue corner, fighting out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, weighing in at 220 1/4 pounds. His professional record consists of 17 wins, 1 defeat with 12 knockouts. He's rated number 2 by both the WBC and the WBA. Ladies and gentlemen, introducing Terrible Tim Witherspoon.
Leading the applause
in the
for
red
Tim
corner,
Witherspoon was Greg Page.
Fighting out of Louisville, Kentucky, weighing in at 239 1/2 pounds. His professional record consists of 23 wins, 1 defeat with 18 knockouts. He is rated number 1 by both the WBC and the WBA. Ladies and gentlemen, introducing Greg Page.
And the crowd, I think, really seems to be split.
I thought I heard more anti-Page than pro-Witherspoon. But as Ray said, crowds are fickle, and we'll find out how they feel once the fight starts.
Once again, Ray, if I could read your mind, both fighters have cooled down just during the time that it took from getting from the locker room into the ring here.
Oh, yes, and the perspiration has dried up completely. Butterflies for sure.
All right, now, come back here. Protect yourself at all times. Let's get it on. Come on.
Mills Lane, a district attorney in Reno, no-nonsense guy.
The question here is whether Tim Witherspoon can apply enough pressure to discombobulate Page, who likes to move around a lot.
Well, Page, as they would say down in Texas, is a hoss.
A C-cup horse.
Witherspoon getting the last-minute advice from his corner, and a proficient corner it is. Young, but proficient.
Ready over here?
And what's left then is to settle the issue in the 18-foot square here. First round. This for the WBC Heavyweight Championship. Witherspoon, black trunks, white stripe. Greg Page, white trunks, yellow stripe. Page very active to start things. Witherspoon trying to stay in close. These are two bombers, there's no question about it.
Witherspoon has power in both hands, and at times he turns to southpaw, and he works the body. Very, very strong overhand right. Page, exceptionally fast hands, good movement.
There is a little debate as to whether or not Greg Page has ever been knocked off his feet. Was knocked down once, but it was ruled a slip. And so we'll say, for all intent, he has not been knocked down.
So far, Greg Page is moving around the ring. And again, it's more of a feeling out process. But because these guys are starting the first round out somewhat cold, be prepared for a knockdown, flash knockdown.
Combination by Witherspoon opens up Page for a moment. Well, the crowd that had been sitting on its hands just a moment ago with the opening bell has really come alive here. They're into the fight. Combination and a good right hand by Witherspoon.
You see Tim now is really trying to load up on that right hand.
That was a very quick right hand, too.
He needs to cut the ring off on Greg because what he's doing, he's following Greg Page around the ring. Very good defense by Tim Witherspoon.
To Witherspoon's credit, he did not get careless and try to put Page away. Page was not that seriously hurt from that punch. But it woke him up, I'll tell you that.
Because of Page's hand speed, he's able to do a lot of things that normally get you in trouble, like moving straight up away from a punch. There's a great counter right hand. But he has to be absolutely careful, really careful, against a puncher like Tim Witherspoon.
Come on.
Witherspoon throws those short, compact punches. And those, of course, can be the most devastating kind.
Also, observe when Page walk away. He has a chance to walk away from his opponent and come back with the punch.
He does do, I mean, you make the inevitable comparison to Muhammad Ali, who was here, incidentally, tonight. And Page does do some of the things that Ali did. Not all good traits. He'll look over his shoulder at his opponent. He'll drop his hands around his waist, get up on his toes a lot. Now, whether or not he does that as effectively as Ali did, very seriously questioned.
Take your time. You're doing a good job. That's enough for you, baby. That's enough, Junior. Now give me the stride.
Let's take a look here. I thought it was preceded by a left and a right to the body and then the right hand. We're going to take a look at this from a couple of different angles, and Witherspoon told me earlier that he was going to try to go to the body. That Page, who was already very heavy, if he could slow him down in the body in the last half of the fight, Witherspoon feels will belong to him. There it is. Good right. That combination, I thought, gave the round to Witherspoon.
All right. Jab, right hand around the body, left hook up top. All right. Mouthpiece.
This is the second round, scheduled for 12, incidentally. WBC, remember. Page has been economical with his punches. He hasn't thrown a lot of punches.
Page has to be very consistent with that left jab. He has to keep Tim Witherspoon in the center of the ring and not allow Witherspoon to just go away, throw his punches, especially against the ropes. This is where Page doesn't want to be.
Witherspoon caught Page bouncing off the ropes there and caught him with the right hand.
Step back. Keep him up, Page. You got to get off that neck. Keep him up. Come on.
Mills Lane really a no-nonsense referee in there.
Greg Page glanced over at his corner. I'm sure he was instructed to keep moving.
Mills Lane, incidentally, in that last exchange in the corner, telling Page to keep his punches up. Wild right hand. Witherspoon punches most effectively inside. You see pretty heavy punches here.
Now Page really doesn't want to be here because Witherspoon is a harder puncher. And for Page to move around the ring, he should use that left jab. Because if you're going to move, you need to do something.
Witherspoon, incidentally, hit Page on the break and drew another sharp volley of words from Mills Lane, not to mention from Greg Page. They did touch Greg, though, so all is well here.
Watch for the overhand right by Witherspoon.
Page says, I'm not hurt. That's usually a sign the man is hurt. And that was a shot to the stomach. Solar plexus shot by Witherspoon. And Page is hurt now if he wasn't before.
That body shot thrown by Tim Witherspoon doubled Greg Page over.
Keep him up, come on.
Now you probably see Witherspoon stay on the body. If not, he should.
That was a tough shot right to the midsection. And that just sucks the breath right out of you, doesn't it, Ray?
Yes, it does. Now watch for the overhand right, because the way Witherspoon is positioning himself, he's trying to unleash that right hand.
There's a good left hand to the head. Witherspoon fighting a very intelligent fight so far because he's really not wasting any punches. Bombing right hand again. Page says, no, I'm not hurt again.
You know, this is a similar fight when Page fought Trevor Berbick. Stayed close to him, present a lot of trouble for him, a lot of problems. And Witherspoon's doing the same thing. He's making Page fight his fight.
Keep him up, come on.
End of round two, and another very good round for Tim Witherspoon. And Larry got another warning at the end of the round from Mills Lane to keep his punches up.
Let's go to Witherspoon's corner. This may be the first time in history that a heavyweight champion has a trainer who's younger than he is. 24-year-old Aaron Snow.
Puts you in the position, all right? You're laying back on him a little bit too much, all right? Touch your legs, all right, Tim? Touch your legs. You hurt him a couple times, Tim. You get inside, you got to step up southpaw on him, all right? You got to put it together. Fight. Huh? All right? It's an easy fight. Don't make it a hard one. Come on.
Let's take a look. There's a low blow that landed on the borderline, and the second one landed real low. That's what doubled up Page. We didn't catch that earlier, but it was a decidedly low blow that doubled up Page.
Stay in the corner, please. Come on, you got to get out here on the bell. Come on.
No question about it. Could see it in the replay, could not see it during the round. It was a low blow, not a solar plexus blow, as we said earlier. Round three.
Well, it wasn't a low blow, and Page proved to be a good sport by not complaining.
Camera's getting right in on that shot that really made it apparent. Those are the guys that are really in the middle of this fray. They're almost in there as close as Mills Lane is. There's a bombing right hand that came behind a left. Good right hand by Witherspoon behind a left hand. Witherspoon still being very patient.
That's what Page has to be very careful about doing, falling back against those ropes when Witherspoon is able to throw those looping right hands. What he should do really is tie this man up against the rope. Get back to the center of the ring and keep moving.
All right, one step back, King. Come on, one step back, King. Come on, one step back, King. Now, come on. Get him off. Step back, come on. Punch it up, both of you.
Once again, Mills Lane telling Witherspoon to keep his punches up. That's about 4 times that he's had to tell Witherspoon that. Incidentally, in Witherspoon's corner between rounds, you heard him say, when you get him inside, go southpaw on him. So we'll see if Tim Witherspoon can do that. Page fighting a lot of this fight with his back to the ropes.
Good job. Come on, punch at him. Come on. Get him up. One step back. Come on, get back. Both of you, get him up. Let's go. Come on.
Now Mills Lane tells both fighters to get him up.
That weight that Greg Page is carrying, if he should just lean and put all that weight on Tim Witherspoon, it will wear him down.
Page seems to be in the corner once again by choice. He's not being forced in there, and he pulled Witherspoon to him that time.
Witherspoon's getting more body behind his punches than Greg Page. Page is more so just throwing a series of punches with his arms. Not really powerful punches.
if this third round is slowed just a little bit. None of those shots really doing much damage. Page getting a little better of it.
Bad left hook by the Page hurt Tim Witherspoon.
Witherspoon trying to fight out of trouble here. At the end of the third round. Good round at the end for Greg Page. We want to remind you, World Championship Boxing continues on Friday, March 30th. Marvelous Marvin Hagler against Juan Roldan, 10 o'clock Eastern Time, 7 out here on the Pacific Coast. That's live. I'll be there with Larry Merchant and Sugar Ray Leonard, the Marvelous One, defending his undisputed middleweight title for the ninth time. It happens live only on HBO. And the comeback of Sugar Ray Leonard takes place on Friday, May 11th. That's also at 10 o'clock Eastern Time, live. Be with us for the comeback of our own Sugar Ray Leonard right here, only on HBO.
Not too hard, not too hard.
Let's see what we can get out of Greg Page's corner.
Take your time. Bing, 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 bing. Hey, keep the left jab, left hook. Left hook. Hey.
I think Tim Witherspoon might have gotten a little bit of an idea that Greg Page can, in fact, punch at the end of that third round, and we'll see if he's a little bit more cautious here. Page has gone flat-footed here.
Get off that neck. Come on, Page. Get
He's
off
up
that
on his
neck.
toes
Come
for the
on.
first couple of rounds. Back up on his toes now, trying to measure Witherspoon. Left hook by Page.
There has not been any indication that the weight is really bothering Greg, because he's more so using it in his best interest as far as leaning and putting power behind his punches.
Get him out. Come on, punch out. All right, come on, punch out. Come on.
A lot of holding going on here.
Come on, punch out. Come on.
Bill's Lane telling him to punch out, and now Page pushes Witherspoon away.
You notice that Page just walked away. Again, he has to be very careful with a puncher like Tim Witherspoon.
Well, again, that's a Muhammad Ali tactic, but perhaps it should have stayed with the greatest.
But you know, Barry, Page is able to get away with it because of his speed. I've seen him knock a lot of guys out by walking away.
There are quite a lot of punches thrown in this fight, and the fight could come down to a case of conditioning. Witherspoon trying to go downstairs and then cover up while Page bangs away at the head.
I think this fight is going to determine upon who can take the best body shot.
They're just leaning on each other right now, throwing a lot of punches, a lot of them landing on the arms and the gloves. Crowd doesn't like it, but this is still pretty much of a scientific going on here. Page is holding Witherspoon's left arm. Now Witherspoon punches free.
Page is also relied upon points, and Witherspoon is relied upon one big bomb.
A lot of punches being thrown here. They have to take their toll at some point.
Keep him up. Come step back. Come on.
I don't think these fighters are particularly tired yet. I think this is tactics here at the bell.
Both fighters deciding to test each other's will and stamina and fortitude in that exchange on the ropes to see which one can be dominant in this fight. That was just a battle for dominance at that point in the fight. Witherspoon.
Just put a little bit more together on him, all right? He touch you with a shot, come winging right back. He had him hurt over there in the corner, Tim. Get your feet right, strap down on him. Strap down on him so you get leverage on your punches, all right, Tim? Ready, so good. One more time. Come on.
This is the 5th round. They come to the center of the ring, and we'll see what the tactics for this round are. Actually, we've had 4 different fights so far through the first 4 rounds.
Well, they've changed their tactics time and time again. Inside boxing, Page on the move. Page becomes a puncher. Witherspoon changes up.
Witherspoon's corner told him that he had Page hurt in the corner in the 4th round. I didn't see that if it was a fact.
Well, some of the punches, because of the crowd's involvement, are really misleading.
Good counter punch by Page. He had Witherspoon opened up.
For Greg Page, I think he's doing the best thing, trying to make Tim Witherspoon throw a punch and then correct his mistake. Because you saw there, Barry, Witherspoon was trying to load up one big left hook. He needs a jab. His jab can get him closer, and he'll be able to land a better punch.
Witherspoon getting just a little bit careless in the last couple of rounds.
Punch out, 2 hands of free.
Here again is a matter of dominance.
And Greg Page getting a slight edge in here, I think.
Look. I want you to keep him up. And you keep him up too, okay? Come on.
Once again, Mills Lane taking charge, telling both fighters to keep their punches out.
You notice that Mills Lane's kept letting the guys know to bring those punches up. The way they're punching, because they're both leaning over, they have a tendency to hit below the belt.
That was a good right hand by Witherspoon. Certainly the best punch of this exchange on the ropes here. And an uppercut.
That was a beautiful uppercut by Tim Witherspoon.
Page keeping him close. Might be hurt a little bit. 15 seconds remaining here in the 5th round. Witherspoon holding him and then hitting him. At the bell.
The rap on Tim Witherspoon used to be that he didn't punch enough. Angelo Dundee called him a union fighter. He wouldn't throw more than 20 punches in a round.
Stand up and punch at him.
If he's a union fighter, he's upped his output. He's throwing 30 or 40 around.
Bring him out. If you just go to work.
Let's take a look at an uppercut in here at close quarters. This makes for a very tough and rugged fight, but not for a very exciting one, to say the least.
Turn him on, put those hands up. You know what your hand been doing? I do a lead away. 1, 2 now. Okay. Now switch it over to 1, 2. Ball game should be over. Switch it over.
So the 6th round, and in Greg Page's corner, they said a couple of punches and the ball game could be over. 1, 2, take him down. Sounds easy, doesn't it?
It does. You notice that Tim Witherspoon changed up now to southpaw. He's ambidextrous, and he's effective because he punches well with both hands. I like those combinations by Greg Page. He goes to the head, and he dips hard to the body.
But he took a good right hand from Witherspoon. Page has fought this fight with purpose, I think, on the ropes.
Inside, Witherspoon changes to southpaw, and now he's changes back to orthodox.
That's what his corner told him to do 2 rounds ago. Witherspoon got the better of that. Very close fight so far.
Because of the tempo of the fight, both fighters are starting to breathe heavily from the mouth, which shows signs of fatigue. Also, the amount of body shots being delivered by both guys.
Witherspoon is effectively stepping away when they are in close quarters and managing to get at least 1 punch in to the face of Greg Page.
Come on.
Neither man is marked. We're in the 6th round.
Notice where Witherspoon keeps that right hand on the left side of his chin. What Page could do is that he could fake a jab and throw a left hook.
Once again in the corner. Right hand, actually just a glancing left hand that time by Witherspoon. Page was moving back with that punch.
But I think this is an opportunity where Witherspoon can take advantage of the fact that Page has become a stationary target. Work that body, slow his movement down.
Witherspoon rather has had some success at stepping back and coming over with a right cross. A couple of battle shifts here.
You see now Witherspoon has gotten to work the body now.
Very little damage being done here. There's just a lot of leaning going on. Could take its toll on, as you mentioned, with the weight advantage that Greg Page has. It could have an effect. But really, it is Witherspoon that is leaning on Page more than Page leaning on Witherspoon. End of the 6th round.
We'll stay right with Tim Witherspoon. The feeling I get about this fight at this point is that, although it's a bit dull, Witherspoon is landing almost all of the heavy punches that I could see. He gets his body behind the punches. His
Hey, Tim, you're on the inside, right? Start pulling your head around it. Pull it back, set it down, all right? Start pulling your head, then left hook goes, all right? Put some shots together, Tim. You're on the inside and you're waiting for them.
Keep him in the center of the ring. Let's swap. That's enough. Like this. To keep him in the center of the ring, give him some more. You do it, well, show me then. Well, show me how good you feel.
All right? Yeah.
All right, let's go. There's Larry Holmes. I wonder how he's got this fight. Holmes, 6 rounds to none over both fighters.
I think so. I don't think he really wants too much of either one of these guys either. So this is the 7th round. It's been a fight fought in close quarters. Witherspoon's corner telling him to throw combinations. Page's corner being very calm. Either way fight. But Witherspoon clearly the heavier shot so far. Pretty good left hand by Witherspoon. He tries to come back with an uppercut. Catches Page with a right and another left. And Page says baloney.
Well, one thing for sure, Barry, both guys can take some big shots.
Yeah, and they're both pretty fit. I would expect by this point one or the other would be starting to get a little bit tired. That has not been the case.
Come on, punch out.
Long range for one of the few times in this fight.
I noticed that both fighters' hands are dropping, although Greg Page fights with his hands pretty much down. It could be signs that, they both become arm weary.
Witherspoon's right hand is dropping to a certain extent.
Watch for a leadoff right from Greg Page.
Left hand by Witherspoon, but he took a right hand by Page. Page has always considered himself, actually, to be a counterpuncher. Matter of fact, when Greg Page fought Jimmy Young, he said, we're both counterpunchers, and that makes for a dogfight. Michael Katz of the New York Times said the crowd would have preferred Rin Tin Tin or Lassie.
What they're doing, Barry, is in fact, they hit each other with good shots, but that's all. They punch and they rest. They need to take advantage of it.
A little blood inside the mouth of Tim Witherspoon. That could have a cumulative effect. Right hand a little short.
Come on.
A good right hand by Witherspoon, but again, Page backs off, not hurt.
I'm looking for a looping right hand by Tim Witherspoon. A lot of times, Page is in position to be hit by that shot.
Page starting to punch a lot with his arms here. Not to say he's getting arm weary, but not quite as much snap, I don't think.
Try to have a look at Tim Witherspoon's cut lip. It's probably an interior cut. Doesn't appear to be bothering him very much.
Hey, Tim, come on, you got to put some punches on. You got to put some punches together.
We'll take a look at one of the exchanges in that round right here.
All right, Tim.
There's the left hand, a flush on the jaw of Page. Once again, he appears to be landing the heavier blows. How much the officials take that into account remains to be seen.
Come on, Tim, you can get him out. Don't forget, Tim.
This is the sort of fight where after 8, 9, 10 tough rounds, one guy is just likely to collapse. Because they are receiving quite a bit of punishment for big men.
A lot of punches being thrown in this fight by both men. Witherspoon seemingly the heavier armament here.
You guys get that ice?
But you never know. Bring 5,000 people to a fight, and you're going to see 5,000 different views of the same fight. That time Page stepped on Witherspoon's foot, backed him off, and Witherspoon with a whistling right hand.
Page is able to move his chin just time enough to get away from those bombs.
One step back.
The punches that are thrown by Tim Witherspoon are coming like missiles, and they have been just grazing Page's chin.
All right, you guys, hang free. Good job.
Page back up on his toes. First time in a couple of rounds he's done that. There was a left hand by Page when he did have Witherspoon open, and it didn't seem to have much on it.
Greg Page is very effective when he throws a left hook to the head and doubles to the body.
That's the halfway mark, round number 8. And a chopping right hand on the top of the head.
Now, wait a minute. Come here. Now, both of you start that shit, you're out of here, all right? Come on.
I think that tells the whole story. Both of you keep doing that stuff and you're out of here.
Now we see a little bit of anger and frustration.
Mills Lane really controlling the fight, though, very well, I think.
I think he's doing a fantastic job, especially two big guys.
Page working at long range a little bit more in this round than he has. I would think Greg Page would be effective at long range, actually.
He's very effective, especially when he's moving and giving the head and body feints, Barry. Using that left jab especially.
But at the moment, it's looking perhaps like there could be a little bit of fatigue setting into Tim Witherspoon. His punches don't seem to have quite the snap they did. Coming toward the end of the 8th round.
Okay, now come on. One more time. One more time is going to cost you. Come on, get him on. Come on.
Let's see how Greg Page is holding up under the fire. Take a look at that punch on the break. Something happened before that I think got Witherspoon upset. It just hit Page on the shoulder blade, it looked like. It didn't catch him clean, and Page didn't seem to be bothered by it very much. I think Mills Lane was more bothered by it.
The uppercut really made Tim Witherspoon angry.
There's 24-year-old Aaron Stoll.
Come on, Tim. Put some punches together, Tim. You're right in there. Okay. Start hooking it. Okay. 1, 2, 3, strike.
At this point in the fight, I have Witherspoon ahead 4 rounds to 2 and 1 even, largely because he's been the aggressor and landed the heavier blows. I'm sorry, 4 rounds, 4, 3 and 1.
And looking at Ray Leonard's scorecard, if you don't mind my saying here, Ray, you've got it dead even right now. And I do want to mention one thing before we get too far into this round. At the very end of the last round, Mills Lane has said to Tim Witherspoon, if I have to tell you to keep mud one more time, it's going to cost you. And in a fight that's this close, it could really cost him.
I think it's a difficult fight to really score, because what happens, Witherspoon gets inside, his punches are landing more effectively, but what you have to keep in mind is the fact that Greg Page is throwing combinations.
And remember, this is a 12-round fight, not a 15-round fight. So we're getting down to Never Never Land here. Tim Witherspoon breathing through his mouth quite a lot now. And Greg Page, to his credit, toting around 239.5 pounds. Still seems like he's got a little bit left here.
All right, one step back. Attaboy, Tim. One step back, Greg. Come on, attaboy, come on.
Both fighters are really putting a lot behind their left hooks, and it's all nearly throwing them off balance.
That was a good left hand by Page, and a right hand behind it. And for the first time, Page has Witherspoon hurt. I think Witherspoon's a little bit tired here, Ray.
He's really puffing hard now out of his mouth. Now those shots thrown by...
And a combination by Witherspoon has Page against the ropes, but he takes his head.
You really can't start to say anything, because what happens, the other fighter retaliates and comes on strong. Page lands a series of punches, and all of a sudden, Tim Witherspoon retaliates with a few combinations of his own.
Witherspoon had been breathing in a labored fashion, trying to catch his breath whenever they're at long range. Now he leans on Greg Page. But then just when it looked like he was starting to be all done dancing, he came back with a good combination.
What Witherspoon is doing, he's laying inside, now he's getting a wind, he's getting a breather rather, and he tries to load up. You see how he waits and he starts to punch.
Backs Page off again. Going down toward the 15-second mark, remaining round 9. Page dropped his left hand, and Witherspoon was just a little short with an overhead right.
Get him up, Page. Come on. Time.
I've been mean this round. Let's be mean this round. Let's put together. Be mean this round. Gotta be mean now. No. No, let it be. Just give me a little sweat. Just wait. No, wait.
Here they are in center ring where Page had landed probably his best shot of the fight. And then moments later, while Page was thinking about that, Witherspoon came right back with a 4-punch flurry, 2 of the punches landing solidly. We're going into round 10.
Hard punching, Tim. Come on, lean on him. Come on, Tim. Come on, let's go.
10th round, and in Page's corner, they were saying, you got to have this one, Greg. So there could be at least a bit of a sense of urgency in Page's corner. It's not to say that he's out of the fight. He's not by any stretch of the imagination, and in fact could be ahead of the fight.
You know, I think why Page's corner is so concerned is the fact that Witherspoon was able to finish the round very strongly, which has a great influence on the judges.
To be honest with you, I have never been able to figure out the judges in the city of Las Vegas.
Well, it depends on what they're looking for. Clean boxing, aggressiveness.
Come on.
Yeah, I really don't mean that necessarily in a derogatory sense. I've just never been able to get a fix on what's important to them. Left hand by Witherspoon.
Get off the neck, Greg. Come on.
Witherspoon is going upstairs now more than he was before, and I can't help but wonder if perhaps the reason for that is not that Mills Lane had said enough is enough. You got to stop it. You're going to lose points or even a round. Neither man is really marked at all. Slight bleeding inside the mouth of Tim Witherspoon.
Witherspoon now is trying to throw straight right hands, which is something really uncommon for him. He normally throw overhand rights, and most of the time they land. But with Page, he's having a little problem because Page has been somewhat elusive to the head. This is something you have to watch, Berg. Inside, Greg Page is throwing combinations. Not big punches, but he's throwing punches.
Page going downstairs now more than he was earlier. Popping an occasional uppercut. There's an uppercut by Witherspoon. Page going up and then down.
All right, one step back. Come on, one step back.
Now, Page was using his weight. He was actually just pushing to the Witherspoon back.
Good combination by Greg Page, scoring to the face of Tim Witherspoon. And Witherspoon leans on Page. Both these fighters obviously very fit coming in here.
Excellent condition on both fighters' part. The question about Page's stamina and endurance, I'm sure it's been answered.
10 seconds remaining here. This is the 10th round.
Come on, attaboy, come on.
Neither fighter seems desperately tired. In fact, of the two, I would have to say Greg Page is probably the fresher.
Well, the winner of this fight is the one who's going to be able to dig down and come up with something extra in the last 2 rounds. There's an old expression, cut yourself a new piece of bait and fish a little deeper. They're going to have to go inside themselves to come up with something.
Good combination. Okay, one now. Ready, Tim?
Listening to Tim Witherspoon's corner.
Got 2 more. You know, Josh, let's get it, man. Let it go. Let's do it.
You know what I'm saying? 6 minutes, man. Hey, 6 minutes. Not too much. That's enough. 6 minutes. Give me 6 minutes, man. That's all I ask for. That's enough. Don't give me that. Come on. Give me 6 minutes, man. Give me 6 minutes. Come on.
My impression is that because Witherspoon has been the aggressor throughout the fight, that he's expended a little bit more energy.
Yeah, you sense a little bit more freneticism coming from the corner of Tim Witherspoon than you do from Greg Page. Overhand right again by Witherspoon. Didn't seem to take quite the toll it had earlier, however.
I'm sure both fighters, they realize that these last 2 rounds are deciding factors in this fight. It's been a relatively close fight. It's been this way, that way, and the fact these 2 rounds are very important.
Been a good fight, actually. It's been a very tactical fight. And it's drawn a few boos from the crowd, but I'm not sure they're justified boos. Witherspoon backs off, slaps him with a right hand. No knockdowns, no marks on either man. We're in the 11th round. Good combination by Page. However, Bills Lane says one of them was low.
Greg Page's mouthpiece dropped out, and it seems as though Tim Witherspoon gave him an opportunity to put it back.
Not much action in here. Crowd misleading you just a little bit here. Page leans on Witherspoon. They'll come back to the center of the ring. There was a right hand by Witherspoon snapping the head of Greg Page back.
Come on. All right, one step back. Come on, one step. Come on.
The next round, both fighters must be really aggressive.
Yeah, it really is going to come down to the last round, or it seems as though it should come down to the last round. A fight like this, of course, is such a subjective thing. One judge could see it completely different from another, and rightfully so.
That's true.
Because you can really make a case for either one of these guys.
See, Greg is still throwing punches, but Witherspoon's punches are like bombs.
There's a good right hand and a combination by Witherspoon. But he takes the shot from Page and goes against the ropes himself. Very good combination, maybe the best of the fight by Witherspoon. Page is right back, though. The starch has not gone out of him.
That was a great combination, 2-punch combination to the head. Witherspoon, it might have won him the round, because nothing else decisive happened in that round. Once again, I should point out, Tim Witherspoon has been the aggressor throughout. In the past, when we had questioned the scoring of Las Vegas officials, it's usually because they've given the aggressor too much credit. There's the right, followed by the left.
Get ready for a war.
3 minutes of boxing left. This could decide the WBC Heavyweight Championship. Larry Holmes watching his title be won by someone and not lost by the other. Witherspoon gets the first combination of the final round. As much as you have to be the aggressor, you can't get careless here either. That is very much similar to another fight that we saw.
I would say this fight is very similar to Norton Holmes. And who wants it the most? And these guys are throwing everything. They're fighting their hearts out. You have to take a head off to both of them, Barry. I mean, they've really put up a great display of championship material.
And to pick up on Larry Merchant's phrase of a while ago, they are both cutting bait, and they are both fishing deep. the 11th round with a combination and started the 12th round with a combination. We'll see if it has a lasting memory.
Well, because of the closeness of this fight, I would be more aggressive if I was Greg Page.
On the ropes, that's where a good portion of this fight has been fought. Both men tired, but neither exceedingly so.
I've been waiting all night, Barry, for a leadoff right from either Witherspoon or Page. But I've been seeing a lot of left hooks thrown.
Both men have been hurt, but neither has been in any danger of going down. Neither man is marked. Slight cut inside the mouth of Tim Witherspoon. Hasn't seemed to bother him a great deal. And in fact, has not shown too much blood for the last few rounds.
It's unfortunate that the Harris have been a loser. And I'm sure a rematch.
Again, it's Witherspoon. Witherspoon really more aggressive as he has been throughout the fight. It could be the difference.
Witherspoon is really starting to dig now. He's working the body.
Page still on his toes. Tried to come around with the left hand. Couldn't do it. Caught Witherspoon on the arms. There's the story. 20 seconds remaining in the fight.
Even now, they can reach down and influence the judges.
Witherspoon, a left hand. Head-to-head, shoulder-to-shoulder. That's where it's been fought. That looks like it's going to be where it ends. 5 seconds remaining in this one. It's over. I'm not sure it wasn't over 5 seconds early. Great fight, no matter what way you look at it, Ray. Great fight.
It was a dramatic fight. Very fast-paced first 5-6 rounds. Witherspoon stayed aggressive. Greg Page proved the critics wrong, that he couldn't move and that he didn't have the stamina and endurance. And the last round displayed a great deal of heart and determination.
Well, they always said that the rap, if any, on Greg Page was his stamina. You can forget about that rap.
For sure. And plus, he was on his toes. I think you have to keep that in mind. He was on his toes.
So now it's in the hands of the judges. And which way they go, I couldn't really make a guess.
It's a close fight. It's a really close fight, Barry. And I think the way the judges may look at it as far as who should win this fight is who was the most aggressive.
You know, the other factor, too, Tim Witherspoon had a very close fight here with Larry Holmes. There were a lot of people thought Witherspoon should have won that fight, and he didn't. And I can't help but wonder if tucked away in the back of somebody's heads is, let's make an amend, perhaps. Right now, let's go up to the ring announcer, Chuck Hull. We will get the official decision. Here's Chuck.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a majority decision.
Split decision.
Judge Chuck Minker scores 114 Page, 114 Witherspoon. Judge Jerry Ross scores 117, 111. And Judge Lou Tabbitt scores 117, 111 for the winner and new WBC heavyweight champion of the world, Terrible Tim Witherspoon.
Well, it was as we expected, really. A strange scoring system. Two judges had it very lopsided, and one judge had it dead even.
I had the fight scored closer, and I think what they looked at was the aggressiveness of Tim Witherspoon. But also you have to look at the fact that Greg Page threw a lot of combinations. A great fight by both fighters.
It was a great fight. Greg Page has no reason to hang his head. Tim Witherspoon collapsing into the arms of his handlers. Great emotional release, I'm sure, for Tim Witherspoon. Larry Merchant is trying to get near him. As soon as he does, we will go up to have a word at the winner. That's Carl King, the son of Don King and the acting manager of Tim Witherspoon, hugging his charge and doing so with good reason. He fought a gallant fight. You can't question the fact that he won the fight, but the other side of the coin is if Greg Page had won, you wouldn't be able to question that either.
That's true, Barry. And that's the reason for judges.
So a very interesting judgment on the part of the three officials. 114, 114 and then 2 judges had it 117, 111. Let's go to Larry Merchant now, who's with the winner. Larry?
All right, Tim Witherspoon, congratulations on being the champion.
Thank you.
Why did you win the fight?
Because I had the good determination. I trained hard. I did a lot of training, and I wanted it bad.
Why were you leaning on him and him on you so much of the fight?
He was holding me in, because I knew if I would have took him in the center of the ring, I would have beat him. I'd have beat him on points. I'd have beat him bad. Okay.
Was that your daughter?
Yeah, that's her. The neck. Come on, watch out. Hey, take your belt. Let your belt. Let's see you in your belt.
See, you worked very hard on his body.
Right.
Was that your plan?
Right. To slow him down and do both to the head and later rounds.
Could you feel that you ever hurt him?
Yes, I heard him every round. Every round he was holding me into the rope so he could try to score points. So I tried to pull him off so he could box in center ring because I knew I could beat him in the center of the ring.
It seemed that you had the meaner intentions on every one of your punches, that you were trying to hurt him.
I was trying to hurt him. Like I said, he was pulling me in on the ropes and holding me in and trying to score points. So later rounds, I just laid back and told him to come off the ropes.
What do you think about the future? What do you want to do in the immediate future?
By me winning the belt, I'm going to be the best champion there ever was. Condition-wise, intelligent-wise, and all-around-wise.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Larry.
Tim Witherspoon, another champion from Philadelphia. Back to ringside.
Okay, Larry Merchant, also another champion from Philadelphia. Ray Leonard, let me ask you, will the boxing community accept Tim Witherspoon as the heavyweight champion of the world?
I'm sure they will, because it was such a display of championship material from both fighters. I'm very, very happy for Tim Witherspoon and very proud of Greg Page. I mean, they display what makes true champions.
You know, people said that in the fight with Larry Holmes, it was kind of a fluke. Tim Witherspoon was a kid who really didn't belong there in the first place, and all of a sudden he came along and he gave Larry Holmes all he wanted. I think tonight he really went out and proved that that one was no fluke, and his future really is very much ahead of him.
Well, Brad, the last 2 rounds was evident that Tim Witherspoon was qualified.
He really took the fight to Greg Page, and I'm sure his people, even though they said there was a lot of inexperience in his corner, I'm sure his people told him, you got to go out there and you got to win it. You can't sit back and wait for the other guy to lose it.
Well, the inexperience is a factor, but I think the natural ability of a Tim Witherspoon and the sheer determination and drive paid off.
Well, Greg Page is the loser of the fight, but really, I hate to use that word because he really did lose it. He shouldn't be hanging his head. Right now, he is with Larry Merchant. So let's go to Larry Merchant with Greg Page.
I'm with Greg Page. Greg, why do you feel you lost the fight?
It's all in the system. No, I don't have no comments about nothing. The only thing I say is in the system. You can ask Don King and the judges that. I don't know. You know, I don't have nothing derogatory to say about Witherspoon. I don't have nothing derogatory to say about anyway. It's just the system.
It seemed from ringside that he was the aggressor throughout, and probably that's why he got the
He might have
decision.
been aggressive, but he didn't land more punches than I did. He didn't.
Don't you think he landed harder punches?
Well, harder punches, that doesn't make a difference. It's the case of scoring. Like, if that's a case of somebody knocking somebody out every time, so be it. You know, this ordeal in this boxing scene is, you know, you can win the fight by points, but you got to beat the hell out of somebody. Pardon my language. But, you know, he got the nod. So what the hell? You know, I get it.
What are your feelings about him as a fighter now that you've gone through with him?
Just like I said at first, I don't feel nothing. He's a good fighter, and I figured I thought I beat him. And
why would the system be against Greg Page more than against Tim Witherspoon?
I know you ask Don King and everyone else that. I don't know. You know, I can't get into that because I don't know. I've been going through hell with boxing ever since I'm through. This is my, you know, right now, this is my retirement, man. I'm through with it because I've been going through hell my whole damn career. I'm through with this bullshit.
Thank you, Greg Page. I guess he's through with this stuff. And back to ringside again.
Okay, thanks, Larry Merchant. Well, retirement, everybody seems to talk about it. In this case, I feel 100% certain we'll see Greg Page in the ring again.
I'm sure, Bert. Greg Page has nothing to feel bad about. I think he's qualified. He should be back.
Greg Page, in fact, has said since 1981 we've been taking it one step at a time, and tonight we ran out of steps. I don't think it's really fair to say that he did run out of steps. He took a quantum leap tonight, only perhaps the quantum leap was sideways. So Tim Witherspoon has won the WBC Heavyweight Championship with a 12th round decision over Greg Page. Page, the #1 contender, coming in.
Harry Papakata Lambus, and judging in ringside, Rosemary, Dr. Kirschenbaum, and Jack.